You've shared some really compelling material about the city of David during the Second Temple period and, well, beyond, too. It really feels like we're holding these fragments, pieces of a lost world. And today, we're going to try and fit some of these fascinating pieces together.
Indeed. And the lecture transcripts you share, they offer several quite distinct viewpoints on this pivotal era in Jerusalem's history. We'll be exploring archaeological discoveries, historical accounts, and, well, various ways scholars have interpreted them to understand this really crucial time.
Absolutely. And our mission today, I think, is to delve beneath the surface a bit, go past just the simple descriptions of, say, walls and tombs. We want to understand who these people were, how they lived, and, what the significance of these physical remains truly is for how we understand this whole period.
Exactly. Understanding the Second Temple period isn't just about ancient history. Uh, it's about grasping the very foundations of both Judaism as we know it and the world where early Christianity really took root. It fundamentally shaped, well, everything, religious, social, political life in the region.
Okay, let's try and unpack this then. Because one thing that really jumped out at me in the material was this shift in how historians are looking at this era now. It's not solely focused on battles and kings anymore, is it?
It's a very keen observation, yes. While earlier historical work often did emphasize military campaigns, royal lines, big construction projects, contemporary scholarship is increasingly focusing on the social and cultural fabric of the time. We're, let's say, less concerned with just cataloging the buildings and more interested in the lives of the people in them, their daily routines, their beliefs, their social structures.
Yeah, it's like moving from just studying the blueprints of a house to actually understanding the lives of the family who lived inside. And this exploration we're doing today, it's really just one step in this much larger ongoing effort, isn't it? Trying to reconstruct a full picture.
Precisely. Think of it like a huge historical jigsaw puzzle. Today, we're examining some particularly intriguing individual pieces, but it's vital to remember they all fit within a much broader context, something we'll probably touch on again in future discussions.
Okay, so to start putting this picture together, let's talk about the physical layout, the city itself. Our sources mention the city walls a lot, and Josephus seems to be, well, our main guide here, right?
He is indeed. Josephus, writing after the Great Revolt, gives us arguably the most detailed account of Jerusalem's layout during the Second Temple period. He famously described the city as being fortified by three distinct walls and using the natural ravines for extra defense in some areas.
Okay, right. So let's visualize these three walls then. The first wall, Josephus says that encompassed the upper and lower cities. So that would have been the core of Jerusalem, likely including areas fortified even way back in the First Temple period, maybe along Hezekiah's old lines.
That's a good way to picture it, the original urban heart.
Hmm.
Then we have the second wall. This one is generally thought to be Herod the Great's doing. It likely enclosed newer residential areas that had sort of popped up north of the original city, closer to the expanded Temple Mount.
Right. And then the third wall, this is where it gets really interesting because it was a massive project stretching way out to the north. Josephus tells us Agrippa I started it, but it wasn't actually finished until just before the Roman revolt blew up. Its exact path is still debated, but archaeology, like near the Russian compound and the Bitzel building, is trying to trace it.
Yes, and what's really crucial to grasp here is the timeline. The third wall wasn't finished until the late 60s CE, like right on the eve of the Roman siege. So when we see later maps or models of Jerusalem showing this huge area enclosed by the third wall, it's essential to remember the city wasn't actually that size for the whole Second Temple period. It really ballooned in its final decades.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, like comparing a town in its early days to the sprawling city it becomes later. And the sources also noted that the area inside this eventual third wall actually had tombs in it, like the Queen of Adiabeni's tomb. What does that tell us?
Well, the presence of tombs within that area strongly suggests that these northern districts weren't very densely populated in the earlier parts of the Second Temple period. Ancient Jewish tradition generally discouraged building houses too close to burial sites because of ritual purity concerns.
Okay, so the tombs act almost like markers saying less crowded here earlier on. And speaking of ritual purity, the material also mentions something fascinating. The intentional clearing of graves along major roads, like actually emptying them out.
Yes, exactly. Along important routes like Derek Levon, archaeologists have found graves that were meticulously emptied. No bones, no pottery fragments. This deliberate clearing was likely done to prevent ritual impurity for the huge numbers of pilgrims and travelers coming to Jerusalem. It really underscores how important those purity rules were.
Wow, it's those tiny details that really make the past feel, well, real.
Yeah.
And the idea of mikvot, the ritual baths, being built inside First Temple period tombs, that's surprisingly practical.
It is, isn't it? A striking example of the city growing and people creatively reusing existing spaces. As Jerusalem expanded, even old burial sites got repurposed to meet the population's needs, in this case, for ritual purification.
Okay, so we're getting a sense of the city's changing shape. Now let's zoom in on some of these specific landmarks mentioned in the sources. These places with stories attached. First up, Absalom's tomb. Those quotation marks seem important, right?
Precisely. That impressive monument down in the Kidron Valley, traditionally called Absalom's tomb, is a beautiful example of how legends kind of latch onto historical sites. The connection probably started just because it's in the Kidron Valley, which is mentioned in Samuel regarding Absalom, and the fact that it was such a visible, lasting monument matching that biblical phrase until this day that likely helped the name stick over time.
And wasn't there a special Rosetta thing on top that's gone now? That seems significant too.
Indeed, yes. The now missing Rosetta, a decorative piece like a petaled flower, was a key feature. Intriguingly, some think its shape, maybe from a certain angle, could look a bit like a hand. And the Hebrew word for a memorial monument is yad, which also means hand. So this possible visual and word connection probably helps cement the legend.
Huh, almost like a visual pun reinforcing the story. And the tradition of throwing stones at it, that connects directly to Absalom being the rebellious son.
Absolutely. Since Absalom rebelled against his father, King David, a tradition grew where people, often parents with their kids, would throw stones at the monument. It was a symbolic act, rejecting rebellion, echoing the harsh consequences in the Bible. The stones piled up for centuries before being cleared by archaeologists, but old drawings show it.
So if it's not really Absalom's tomb, what is it? The sources call it a nefesh. What does that mean exactly?
Ah, yes. This points to a really important shift in burial practices during the Second Temple period, partly influenced by Hellenistic culture. The structure itself is a nephesh, basically, a monument built to commemorate the soul of the person who died. It's separate from the kiver, which is the actual burial cave for the body. Think of the nephesh like an elaborate tombstone or a small mausoleum marking the spot.
Okay, so the fancy building above ground is for the soul's memory, and the body's in a cave nearby.
Got it. And the architectural style of this Absalom's tomb, it sounds like a real mashup. It is remarkably eclectic. One source called it Jerusalemite Hellenistic Pseudo-Roman, which is quite apt. It mixes things like Greek Ionic capitals, those scroll things on columns with simpler Doric frieze elements, and even Egyptian-style decorations like cones and ropes, plus the Rosetta we mentioned. A strict Roman architect probably would have hated it. But in Jerusalem, then, this blend likely seemed quite sophisticated, showing awareness of the wider world. And the style helps us date it firmly to the Second Temple period, obviously long after Absalom lived.
Fascinating. Okay, now right next to it, there's another big tomb, often linked to Agrippa Afera, but that's not certain either.
That's correct. The standard view was that it was built for some wealthy person in the 1st century CE. But the well-known archaeologist, Dr. Gavi Barkay, put forward a pretty compelling theory that it might be the tomb of King Agrippa himself. His argument was based on its sheer size and grandeur, fitting for a king like Agrippa who died in 44 CE.
Right, so matching the archaeology with the known historical figures. But the sources stress this isn't universally agreed upon.
Precisely. While Dr. Barkay's idea is influential, it's still debated in academic circles. Some scholars are more cautious, wanting more solid proof before saying it's definitely Agrippa lost. The general consensus still leans towards, a prominent, rich individual from that 1st century CE.
It's a good reminder that history isn't static. It evolves with new evidence and new thinking. And this tomb was used later on too, wasn't it?
Yes, sometime later, probably in the Byzantine period, it seems it was reused as a sort of hideout or secluded space, maybe by a monk. There's actually a Greek inscription found inside that points to this secondary use.
A tomb becomes a sanctuary. Wow, the layers of history are just incredible. And the sources point out how the Absalom tradition probably popped up after Jerusalem was destroyed, when maybe the exact knowledge of who was buried where got lost.
Exactly. The chaos and displacement after 70 CE meant that precise historical memory faded. Without clear records, people developed popular traditions, often linking remaining prominent landmarks to famous Bible stories to explain them.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly. There's this pebble, an inscription relating to the tomb of King Uzziah. That sounds like a more direct link.
It is a remarkable find, yes. This small stone inscription talks about moving King Uzziah's bones during the Second Temple period. To get the full picture, you need to remember Uzziah's story from Kings and Chronicles. Mostly a good king, long reign, successful military, lots of building. But then his big mistake was arrogance. He went into the temple to offer incense himself, which only priests were allowed to do.
Right, and for that, he got Zareth, often called leprosy, and had to live in isolation outside the city. Tradition puts his quarantine spot right around here.
Precisely. And the story really highlights that crucial separation between religious and secular power. Uzziah crossed a line, tried to take on priestly authority. It had severe consequences, kind of a timeless lesson about absolute power, maybe. Our source suggests this lesson still resonated in the Second Temple period. Despite all his good work, his overreach led to isolation, and eventually, as this inscription shows, his burial had to be relocated later on, with the inscription found in a house built over the original tomb area.
It's a powerful reminder, all right. Now, the Beni Hazzir tomb that connects us to a different group, the priests.
Yes, the Beni Hazzir family were priests who came back to Jerusalem after the Babylonian exile mentioned in the book of Nehemiah. Their tomb is interesting because it represents that older style of family or communal burial. That was becoming less common in the Second Temple period as individual burials, influenced by Hellenistic ideas, grew more popular. Oh, and interestingly, the name Hazir means boar in Hebrew. It fits this weird little trend of Jewish names referencing burrowing animals around that time. Why? We're not entirely sure.
So, the B'nai Hazim is like a snapshot of an older tradition burying the family together during a time when things were shifting towards individual graves. This whole evolution in burial practices seems like a key theme.
It really is. That shift from First Temple family tombs to more Second Temple individual burials definitely reflects growing Hellenistic influence. And that's also when we see the Nephesh emerge, this separate monument for the soul's memory, distinct from the kiver for the body. It's a fascinating change in how death was commemorated. One source even touches briefly on the ecological side, contrasting ancient practices where remains eventually return to the earth with modern ones maybe hinting at revisiting secondary burial.
And finally, the Mount of Olives. The sources mention its importance across different religions and its long history as a burial ground.
Yes, the Mount of Olives is incredibly significant in Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam, often tied to end-of-days prophecies and beliefs. And historically, it was a major cemetery for Jerusalem for a very long time. Graves there go back to the First Temple period, and maybe even earlier. It's always been linked with burial.
Okay, so from the massive city walls down to the individual stories buried in these tombs, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Trying to understand the city of David in the Second Temple period. It's clear it was this vibrant, constantly changing place.
Absolutely. We see how our understanding keeps getting shaped and reshaped by new digs, new interpretations of old texts. And that shift in focus, looking more at the social and cultural side, it just gives us a much richer, more, well, human picture of the people living there. And we've definitely seen that fascinating mix of hard evidence, legends that grow over time, and how later interpretations shape the stories we tell about these ancient sites.
You know, thinking about all these layers of history and interpretation we've talked about today, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of what we think of as solid historical fact about other ancient places might also be this kind of blend, you know, evidence mixed with tradition and later ideas layered on top. What other puzzles are we still putting together, maybe without even fully realizing all the pieces involved?
That's a profound thought to end on. It really encourages us all, I think, to remember that history is a process, an ongoing discovery. Maybe it's worth revisiting historical stories we think we know well, but with this fresh perspective, looking for those layers, listening for the different voices that make up our understanding of the past.